And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
All right, attention to roll call. Welcome, everybody. We got our good friend Marty Dolan here. He's running for New York City Public Advocate. You know, we've spoken about Public Advocate at length on this podcast. Marty, thank you, brother. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background? Where'd you grow up? You know, how'd you get involved in this? What are you looking to run for?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Westchester. My dad was a doctor from Argentina. So I'm first generation. We were 9 kids. We lived in a 2-bedroom house. And when I was in college, New York City went bankrupt. And there was a guy who stepped in named Felix Rohatyn. If you're a New Yorker, you will remember that name. He worked with Governor Carey and then Ed Koch, so they could fix New York City. And I was like, that's who I want to be. I want to be that. I want to be a problem solver. So I became a business doctor, working on Wall Street for about 45 years, just basically solving problems. And the problems, that we solved might seem, kind of obscure, but for example, everybody remembers, the environmental crisis, the asbestos and environmental crisis. Well, that was a $200 billion problem that I helped solve. And then there was the terrible attack on the World Trade Center. So, besides the terrible loss of life and the shocking attack, we had to basically create a new insurance industry overnight. Most insurance contracts for buildings and airports, start on January 1st. So we had to, 100 days to kind of fix up the insurance industry. Then there was the global financial crisis, which is, when the world ran out of money. I was a senior banker at JP Morgan then for the restructuring of AIG, which was the largest corporate restructuring in history, and let's hope it stays that way. So let's hope there's never another one. And so I was kind of sitting there minding my own business, and then you saw the rise of the socialists in the political theater. You had the Squad, and I happened to be living kind of between New York City and Westchester, which meant that my congressional representatives were Jamal Bowman and AOC.
Two patriots.
I thought, how lucky could one guy get? So I decided, I talked to my friends, I talked to my family. I kind of was at a position in my life where I could afford to, the time and the energy to do it. And I thought, there's a lot of problems in the United States. They need some problem solving. They need Dr. Dolan. So I challenged Representative Bowman. Most people don't remember this, but since we're dealing with a police-oriented show, I declared I was running against him. And this was before George Latimer came in. County Executive George Latimer eventually beat him. So I went along to, there's a police community center in Yonkers. It's right on the border of, it's on Riverdale Avenue, or right on the border of the Bronx. And I went down there, and and Congressman Bowman was speaking, and he got up and he was talking about his experience as an educator. So I held up my hand and I said, Congressman Bowman, on the walls of your school, you had posters of, the heroes of the heroes of Black history, and you had a cop killer on the walls of a school. This is a woman who'd been part of the Black Panthers, and she's still alive. She's still in Cuba, awaiting extradition. So I said, will you renounce that it was wrong to support, to glorify somebody in a junior high school who was a cop killer? And he looked at me and he said, who are you to tell me how to run my life. And I was like, I was shocked. It was a terrible response, even if I was just a constituent, but I was his opponent. So when County Executive Latimer entered the race against then Congressman Bowman, and I always try to refer to people by their titles because they've earned them. And there was some redistricting, so I decided I'd run against AOC and really challenge this concept that we're just going to have more and more socialism. I thought that it'd be a really good discussion for New York to have, for the country to have, which is, do we really want more socialism, or is it just like one of those things where it's kind of, creeping up on us? And so I challenged AOC. I got destroyed. She spent $8 million to squash me. But I think people came up to me afterwards and they said, it's a good thing. You're creating a good discussion here. We should really have more of this. We should really talk more about what are we doing with all this socialism? Where is it going? What should we do? And so now I'm running for public advocate, excuse me, where you have a member of the DSA, Democrat Socialists of America, Jumaane Williams, who's the public advocate. And the primary is going to be on June 24th. And then the general election will be in November. So we're continuing our discussion to try to straighten out America, to straighten out the Democratic Party, straighten out New York. And I'm what you would call a right-wing Democrat. So you probably don't think they exist, but they do. And hopefully more of them will keep turning up.
So let's get into that a little bit. First of all, thank you for throwing your name in the hat, because I think that's the bigger problem in politics, is that we don't have people who did things outside of politics, ran businesses, partake in public service, whatever it is, actually had a life outside of politics, then enter into politics and tell us how to run our lives. A lot of people, when it comes to the office of public advocate, they're very aware of Jumaane Williams. They're very aware of him, especially around the time that all of the stuff about Adams came out, New York City Mayor Eric Adams came out, where it was like, oh my God, if we remove Eric Adams, or if he's indicted, or if he goes to jail, Jumaane Williams will take over. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, you voted for him. He's good enough to be the public advocate, but he's not good enough to replace somebody. And so here we are again. Here's the public advocate race again, and it's getting no attention. It's getting no attention in the media, is no attention in the public. Like, what do you think the importance of the office of public advocate is? Like, what is it for you? Like, what do you want to see from it? What would a Marty Dolan's office look like?
Yeah, so I work in J.P. Morgan, for example, was a company of 150,000 people, and I didn't work directly with Jamie Dimon, who's a fantastic CEO. But he basically gave us the attitude that he said, you can lead from anywhere. Like if you're a righteous person, you have good ideas in a big organization, it doesn't matter what your title is, you can lead from anywhere. But and just for your audience, since I hadn't even heard of the public advocate before I started, the public advocate is a position that was created around 30 years ago. It's a little unique to New York. It's not like every city has a public advocate. And what the public advocate's supposed to do is really monitor the city departments, make sure they're fulfilling their duties, and kind of handle things that fall between the cracks. We have in New York, we have 51 city council members. And if I can just tell my little joke here about the hot dogs and the buns. Have you ever gone to the store for a barbecue and you buy the 10 hot dogs, but then you have the 6 buns? So you keep buying hot dogs and buns until you have the same number. We have 51 city council districts and 58 community boards. So you kind of have things that fall through the cracks that way. It's not really a coherent structure, which is one thing I would like to fix. But so the public advocacy role has definitely been viewed as one for the last, couple of public advocates. There's one where it's almost like a soapbox for racial justice, or for the little guy, so to speak. And I'm all for the little guy. I mean, I grew up with, sharing my brother's clothes, and I understand that it's not, it's a good cause. It's good to be for racial equality, but you really have to balance I see it more as a balancing job, where you got 51 city council members who all want things for their districts. They all, in Astoria, they want to fix the flooding. In Brooklyn, they don't want the immigrants at, Floyd Bennett Field. On Wall Street, they want congestion pricing. So you really have 51 people who are there asking for more, and there's nobody asking for less. And I'm not saying that you just have to be there as a negative, but I think the public advocate role should be one where you look at things across the entire city, and especially from what I would call a longer term perspective, kind of a strategic planning, like a 5-year perspective. And because the mayor's busy, the mayor's got a $120 billion budget to run. He's got a couple 100,000 people. And, the public advocate role has degenerated into one where you basically handle complaints. And I don't think that's the right role. I think you really need something that can lift the city up and pick out the things that really need to be done to make the city better.
Yeah, so I got up on the screen right now for those of you that are listening. I have the image from the office of Jumaane Williams, the current public advocate. He says, "Get help. The office of the public advocate assists with complaints and inquiries involving government-related services and regulations. From resolving housing complaints to combating abuse by agencies, the office helps thousands of New Yorkers annually by improving transparency, accountability of city government." So I think, for the last 4 years, I don't think I've seen one action on the part of the public advocate's office at all to help any New Yorkers, to provide any type of transparency to anybody. I have seen somebody run there as more of an activist role. And I think the last 3 people that we've seen who are public advocates were exactly that. It was a placeholder for them to seek higher office, and during their time of being the public advocate, they were activists. They were activists, and they were jumping on whatever the hot topic was, whatever the majority in city council was against. They were right alongside of them. There, especially during the time of the defund the police movement and all that. Like, what do you think that an elected official should be out there at protests and acting as an activist, or should they actually be even doing that? I know you said you want to expand the role, but I don't even see that office does that. I don't see them handling complaints. I don't know one person that the office has helped. And I know all the way up until 2023, they were teleworking. They weren't even at the office. So if you went to the office, his people weren't there.
You're 100% right on all of that. I think I don't think it's the case of the public advocate to be lobbying for their own personal causes. Let me put it that way. And if you look through the current public advocate, the social media it's 100% for racial equality. And again, it's a great cause. We all want to have equal opportunity for people in our society. But what about the taxpayers? What about the businesses? What about the bureaucracy? What about the police? I think you really have to think of it more like an architect, where you're looking at the city and you're saying, here's some distortions that we have to get out of the way. And if I step back from the role of public advocate, I think the problem with our political culture is that it's become one of complaint. It's instead of thinking about what are the things we can do that are better for all of us in the future, people just complaining, and especially the Democrats. When I got into this, I went back and studied what Franklin Roosevelt did. And if you look at what Franklin Roosevelt did, and this is a rich guy up in Hyde Park in a wheelchair, he created the Social Security system. I mean, that's pretty selfless. He created unemployment insurance. He did things that were good, really good architecturally for the society as a whole. He didn't say, let's go have wheelchair ramps. And that's the problem, is that with the people that are in politics right now have become focused on what they want instead of what's best for the society as a whole. So I think we need fresh perspectives in the public advocate office, where you can look and you can say, what are the things that are really holding New York back? What are the distortions? What are the things that are, getting, why do we have 58 city council districts, pardon me, community boards, and 51 city council members? How can that possibly work? The complaint should go to your city council member. That's kind of their role, is to go, if there's flooding in Astoria, they should fix that. So I think there's a long list of things to do. And then the second thing that I think we need to do is restore pride in New York City. We need to restore pride in public service, and no more so than throughout, up and down the police force, up and down all of the municipal departments. I think right now they look at the city leadership and they can't feel great. They just can't feel great. And, morale is low, and you need to have leaders that you're proud of. You need to have leaders who you really look up to and say, okay, we're going in the right direction. And that is not the case. I think the entire leadership team has to be voted out. Brad Lander's got to go. Eric Adams has got to go. Jumaane Williams has got to go. And I think there are some people on the city council who really shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to play a video right now. This is a Councilwoman Althea Stevens. So her and Jumaane Williams, current public advocate, co-sponsored a bill. One of the bills that they co-sponsored was to abolish the NYPD's gang database. So, and what they're saying is that the gang database harms Black and brown people based upon the fact that 96% of the people inside of the database are Black and brown. So, but when you drill down further, what is actually the harm besides the makeup? And by the way, the makeup of 96% of people Black and brown in the gang database is actually the makeup of the gangs throughout New York City. So it's organic. They're trying to paint the gang database as it's racist. But when you drill down on the NYPD's gang database, it isn't shared with any schools or universities. It isn't shared with employers. It isn't shared with landlords. It literally goes nowhere. It's an internal database for when there is a gang shooting, such as we saw the 16-year-old girl shot in the head outside of school in the Bronx. And what that does is NYPD uses that to run the victim's name or any of the targets or shooters' name in the database to find out if, in fact, they belong to any gangs. And if so, they use it to deploy resources. So this is Althea Stevens, and this is her speaking, but this is actually the same argument that Jumaane Williams has on. I just want to play this video and just get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
I've started in council. One of the things that I've said time and time again is that the NYPD needs to rebuild the trust in Black and brown communities, and because of the continuously over-policing in those communities. And the first place I believe that they can start is by abolishing this database. With the database is having clear racial disparities because 96% of the database is made up of Black and brown people. And we all know those are not the only people in gangs. And I would also like to note, being in a gang is not a crime. I wanted that to be clear. I would also like to highlight, since I've started in council, one of the things.
So you see there, she's using the racial disparities to pull it down and to try to attempt to abolish this valuable tool inside of the NYPD. What are your thoughts about the gang database? Is this something that the public advocate should be involved in? And what are your thoughts about their argument?
Well, just let me start with like a disclosure and an explanation. So I'm on the board of a company called Captus. Captus is basically trying to solve the problem, which is in the United States, there are 18,000 agencies that have arresting powers. Just for example, in England, there are 50. So, you've got the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, you have the LAPD, you get to 18,000 law enforcement agencies, and they don't share information. So that's a problem that we're trying to help Axon Technologies solve. And so, for example, I know that we're working with retailers. Now, the retailers have got a big problem called shrinkage, which we call crime. People come in the store and they take stuff. And when you work in a complicated business, you always start to look for what I call the 20-80 rule, which is what's the 80% of the problem. So 80% of the problem with shoplifting is gangs. You got gangs going into a Home Depot or Lowe's, and they're taking out 30 pieces of power equipment, and then they're selling them on Amazon. So you have to know who's in the gang, and it's not the kid stealing a candy bar. It's the gangs, and I know this because I'm involved in it. You also go back to the history of New York. Go back to the time of Mayor Giuliani, or even before that, when he was District Attorney Giuliani, and there was a Cornell professor who created the theory of the RICO law. So the RICO law works by saying that if you're involved in a gang, or you're part of a criminal enterprise, racketeering, then you're subject to a different prosecution than if you're somebody who just commits a one-off crime. So gangs are very dangerous. We've had them before in New York. They're a different variety, which is the mafia, and you've had them now. You're sort of taking root. So I don't have any time at all for this city council person's theory. I think it's I understand why she's saying what she's saying, because it's she perceives that it's a political win, but I think it's a huge distraction. I think you have to give the police the basic tools, the basic information to do their jobs. And if the city council or the department wanted to have controls over who has access to the database, and is it used for school registrations, that's kind of where I think the public advocate or some city supervision would make sense. But I think that's true with every agency. So I don't think what she's saying makes any sense at all.
Yeah, and then just to go further, that 16-year-old girl that was just shot and killed leaving school. She did nothing wrong. She wasn't a gang member, but she was shot during a gang rivalry. The first thing the NYPD did was utilize the NYPD's gang database to not only track down the killer, but as well as to stop further violence that would occur from that shooting. So, I think a lot of the stuff that we hear from city council and from the public advocate, again, is from an activist standpoint, and it's from an uninformed position. Like they're not even willing to have the conversation.
Let me say it even stronger, perhaps, which is, I think when you're the public advocate, one of the best things about the office is your ability to be an educator. I think that's a great opportunity to try to educate the public and to try to raise the standard of the public understanding, to raise the understanding of what are we doing together. Because, again, if you step way back, imagine you're creating a police force from scratch. Well, you've got one cop for every 300 people. It's not going to work no matter how you do it, unless the 300 people are kind of on the same wavelength as the one cop. So you have to have community support for the police. And when you undermine that, you basically, it's like taking the glue out of a table. Everything gets wobbly. So what I think the public advocate should be doing with respect to the police is we really think about ways, how can we reinforce the relationship between the community and the police force? What are the things that you can do? Now, if, that might sound kind of, a little fuzzy, but you can have seminars, you can talk to people, you can educate people. Everybody understands their Miranda rights because they've seen it in a million TV shows, and everybody understands the Fifth Amendment, but not many people understand the Fourth Amendment, which is the freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. So there's a lot you can do there to educate the public. And then I think that, again, like looking long term, money doesn't grow on trees. But if you go through the 78 police precincts in New York, some of them are not that appealing for the community. They're kind of, out of date, wouldn't even say it. They look like they're from another century, 2 centuries ago. And so you got to give some, then there's one, I can't place exactly where it is, but it's upper Manhattan, up in Harlem, where they have a police department. Right next to the police department, they have a basketball court. That's great. I mean, that's what you want. You want basically people not to fear the police, but to look at the police as partners, because otherwise the 300 won't agree to be policed by the 1. So I think we should be looking at our physical infrastructure, which is out of date, and we should try to make the physical policing more, integrated with the community. And then we have to look at technology to make sure that we're really giving the guys all the tools that they need to operate safely and efficiently.
Yeah, and we're 100% not doing that now. And another thing that
unfortunately,
we're it's just it's sad to say, but so there's a unit inside of the NYPD. It's called the Strategic Response Group. Myself and Eric Dim wrote an article in support of the Strategic Response Group because City Council, along with Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, they're trying to abolish the SRG, the Strategic Response Group. And they held this hearing. And during the hearing, they bring in the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And the Civilian Complaint Review Board testifies that basically members of the SRG receive CCRBs at a less rate than regular officers attending protests. They're more easily identifiable. So they do have a higher substantiation rate when it comes to complaints against them. But even the CCRB noted that is only because most of their complaints at protests are closed due to the inability to actually identify the officers. So in this the time of sitting there and saying we need to get rid of SRG, they literally have no argument as to why we're going to get rid of them when they actually police protests better than the average cop that you send there that's not easily identifiable, that could still be involved in having a complaint. And if you believe in transparency, obviously the SRG is the more transparent unit, as they have their shield numbers all over their uniform for that exact purpose. So I just want to bring up Jumaane Williams talking about the SRG, and he just makes complete inflammatory claims without actually providing data or backing anything up. And then the panel that Jumaane Williams, Tiffany Caban, and a few other people put together actually testifies and gives the valid reason on that the SRG actually polices much better than the rest of the department at protests. Yet they still want to abolish it. I was mind-boggling watching this. This was from a public safety hearing in City Council on March 1st, 2023. I just want you to hear what Jumaane Williams and just get your thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. My name is Jumaane Williams, Public Advocate, City of New York. I want to thank Chair Hanks and the members of the Committee on Public Safety for holding this very important hearing. I also want to align myself to some of the comments of the chair, particularly with the administration and NYPD not being here. Held out hope that they would. I think it is shameful and an affront to this council and to New York City as a whole. I understand that there are some legal concerns. I do think just being present, even if it was to read the statement you submitted, would have shown some respect to the process and having this conversation in a public forum. In 2015, the NYPD formed the Strategic Response Group, or SRG, to combat terrorism. This is a voluntary unit that has attracted officers who reportedly wanted to see, quote unquote, more action, and outfits them with riot gear and heavy weaponry, including military-grade long-range acoustic devices, also called LRADs, and machine guns. Originally, the unit was to consist of 350 officers with a budget of $13 million. Quickly, that ballooned to more than 700 officers with nearly $90 million in funds, including $10.2 million overtime last year alone. The SRG's involvement in policing protests, as we have seen, unfortunately, seemed to be more about suppression of speech and assembly and less about keeping everyone safe. Following criticism of the SRG potentially policing large-scale protests, the NYPD claimed in 2015 that the SRG would not be involved in covering protests. However, the NYPD began deploying the SRG to protest later that year. The results of the SRG's presence at protests have been aggressive and chaotic, and have invariably escalated nonviolent protests into dangerous and violent environments. The SRG beat protesters with batons, sprayed crowds with pepper spray, rammed into protesters on their bikes, and trapped protesters using barriers such as shields, bikes, and metal gates with no way for people to escape, a tactic known as kettling, and blasted crowds with noise cannons. I myself have had the brunt of over-responsive protests, several protests, including SRG, including at Occupy Wall Street and at the George Floyd protests of 2020. I've also filmed and witnessed. Many SRG unit members have multiple misconduct complaints against them. Of the 62 SRG officers and supervisors identified by the appeal and videos from 2020 protests, 46 SRG members and 292 misconduct allegations filed against them with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, or CCRB. These complaints included abuse of authority, excessive force, offensive language, and discourtesy. Considering this history, the SRG's abusive behavior is unsurprising. Further, a report published last month examining complaints of police misconduct investigated by the CCRB revealed that the CCRB was only able to substantiate 88 of 321 complaints received. The reason this number is so low is not because misconduct did not occur, rather NYPD officers engaged in purposeful actions to conceal their identity to avoid identification.
So we could end it there. But again, like I said, that he's saying that the biggest problem in policing these protests is that you can't identify the cops. And that's why these complaints weren't substantiated. But when the CCRB goes, they said they don't have that issue with the strategic response group. This is obviously prior to New York City being hit with thousands and thousands of protests. New York City Council and Public Advocate Jumaane Williams are attempting to take out the #1 unit that deals with disorderly groups at large-scale protests that so often that we've seen in the last 2 years have turned illegal, taking over streets, taking over critical infrastructure. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, so we could talk a long time about this. Let me just take a step back, and then we'll come into that. So, I think what's being prosecuted here is completely like some, what I would call, it's a mixture of historical wounds, which are real. We have to admit that, there has been some historical wounds between, the police and the public. And then also what I would call some diversionary tactics from, the worst of the issues in the poorest communities. So what I mean by that is you've got a city where, for example, the school system, which is the crucial thing that we need to fix, right? When you're looking at a forest or you're looking at a garden, you have to plant the young trees the right way. You have to plant the kids the right way. And so we have to get the schools right. And the schools are terrible. The schools are not producing a good product. So what we'll do instead is we'll create this culture where people grow into this culture of complaint, and where they don't trust the city because they went to a bad school, and that it kind of just goes on and on and on. So this is I think a smoke screen. It gets good press. It kind of makes people happy in what I call the echo chamber, which is the echo chamber is the city council and the political world, where let's just complain about something instead of fixing the core thing. Is we have to have good schools, public safety, sanitation, transportation. Instead of fixing the basics, we're going to go complain about something. And what's missed here, the thing that's really missed, is New York's reputation globally. So during the same last 10 years, you've had, unfortunately, you've had mass shootings in Las Vegas. You have mass shootings at concerts. You have this whole thing where things kind of either get out of control, or people purposefully, criminals, bad actors, go try to make things get out of control. And this hasn't really happened in New York yet. Okay. So you have, for example, if you just ever went to Times Square at New Year's Eve, you would just be amazed that it's kept, that it just doesn't spiral out of control. So public safety is number one, and it can very easily, just like that, spiral out of control, and the consequences to New York and its presence in the world would be devastating. So I think that's what's missed here, which is this argument is being used as kind of a racial equality, a grievance. We can't protest, but when I've held rallies, okay, now I've held rallies a couple of times, and you have to have a permit, you have to stay within here, and you can't use your megaphone for more than half an hour. I've been impressed by the police, but there's this idea that's an incorrect idea that you should have, chaos and be able to do what people do whatever they want at protests. Now, this is especially terrible at the college campuses. So, the idea that Columbia let the protests go as long as they did and get as far out of order as they did. You had my once rival AOC on campus telling their leader, Kamani James, how special he was, at the same time that I was in East Elmhurst protesting against 2 cops getting shot in the chest, point blank, by an illegal immigrant. So this is where the Democrat socialists have just got it all wrong. They're completely wrong about this. You cannot undermine the confidence of the 300 people in the one cop. That's the glue that holds the table together. If you do things to undermine that confidence. Now, should police be identified? Yeah, probably it's a good idea. I mean, you got the video camera now, and should we have quality? Absolutely. But those are the problems that you should fix. So, for example, and I want to just finish because I want to talk directly about the old wounds. Let's talk about George Floyd. That's a lot of what's still being prosecuted is the feedback from the George Floyd thing, which is the worst thing anybody's ever seen. It's like, it's not, there's nobody goes away from that feeling good. So,
but what is that? But, again, what does that have to do? But what does that have to do with the NYPD? It happened 5,000 miles away. There was a bad actor. Something happened. It was prosecuted in a court of law. And he's saying that we need to be able to identify police officers and have transparency. But I want to abolish the unit that has the most transparency and most accountability. And the unit, by the way, that is utilized to restore order at mass scale events, such as what we've seen night after night since October 7th.
John,
we saw the Columbia. Like, that's my thing with the politicians is like
irresponsible leadership.
Present an argument,
It's irresponsible leadership, which is, and it's constantly what you see in politics, which is because this thing happened, 1,000 miles away, we're going to defund the police in New York. And you're like, okay, let's have some training. Let's have, on Wall Street, worked on Wall Street. I was trained every month on money laundering. Now, I never laundered money, but I was like beaten to my head, like, you're not going to launder money. You're not, so it's like, okay, I'm not going to do it. And even if, 99% of the cops understand the rules of the road, okay, let's have training. Guys, like, this thing happened in Minnesota. We have to make sure that the police, that the public understand that we're reinforcing our training on this and we're reinforcing that's fine. But defund the police is just an irresponsible political statement by an activist who just wants to get votes. They want to get press coverage, and they make everything harder. They make it harder because then guess what? Then it gets into the school system where the kids go to school and they're like, I'm not going to listen to my, teacher, and I'm not going to listen to the guy in the subway. And so it's irresponsible leadership. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think Eric Dim brings up a great point. He says, can you define a historical wound, particularly in the NYPD, that has caused an adverse effect for the city council to strip away tools of policing? I mean, I can't,
Look, New York's, there's 8 million people. There's been a lot of, there have been bad actors, as you said. With 8 million people and so many interdictions, there are accidents. There are things that go wrong. But in New York City, the police are working in 800 different languages across 5 boroughs. Like, it's a very complex environment. It's not like you're in some village in the mountains where everybody knows each other and it's a simple task. It's a very complex environment. But that's what you don't want brutality. You want everything to be by the book, but you can't defund the police because of something that happened 1,000 miles away. You can make it better. I agree. There are lessons that should be learned.
And then one more public safety issue coming out from the public advocate office. There's a lot of pushback. I mean, I don't agree with Eric Adams on much, but I do agree with Eric Adams that when someone's a public safety threat, when they're a danger to themselves or others, we shouldn't just leave them out on New York City streets, and that's not humane. For years, we had an homeless outreach program. Homelessness is what I've seen in my career, and I think many of the cops on here would agree with me, is homelessness stems from mental illness and drug addiction. And so what we would do is we would use a multi-agency response to go out, and we would be there with social workers and other people to go out on the streets of New York and to offer services first. Even if a crime was actually happening, a low level crime, loitering, outstretched on the bench, things of that nature to keep people from living on New York City streets and to offer places for them to get food and shelter, clothing, medical care. That has since went away. And, the NYPD was always there in more of a security role than the first people to go out there. Although there are times during emergency situations when we do deal with emotionally disturbed individuals, and we will be the first to respond. Emotionally disturbed individual trying to commit suicide, has access to weapons. Of course, we would be the first to go. This is Jumaane Williams on New York City removing mentally ill from the streets against their will. Just want to get your thoughts on what he says.
I think New York City residents want to be safe and they want to be able to use the subway, including my 14-year-old, including my wife. But if you ask them, they don't want police to be arresting people for having a mental health crisis. They want people to get assistance and a continuum of care. The problem with this plan is it doesn't spell out what the continuum of care is. Now, so we don't even know how much funding is going into that versus additional police, who, by the way, don't have the training to make a determination whether someone should be taken.
There's a difference between arresting, though, and detaining someone and putting them, it's not taking them to jail. You're offering them assistance.
Well, think about this, what's happening. You can, quote unquote, involuntarily put someone in the hospital for 2 to 3 days. What happens after that?
Right.
What's going to happen after that? Are we doing a cycle to pretend we're doing something more than we are? And so people want to see, we see this sometimes with homelessness. You want to solve the problem is different than I don't want to see the problem. And we want to make sure that people get the care they deserve. What about people who are in an apartment or who are in a home? The main crux of this is we have to divorce a law enforcement response from a medical response. And people need medical care. Law enforcement should be there in case they're called and need assistance. But the problem with many of these plans is we're putting the law enforcement first, not putting the care and the continuum of care that's needed. I think New York.
So what do you think about that, Marty?
I agree with you. I support Adams on this, what he said on this, which is public safety and the impression of public safety have to be number one. And I think there are some steps being taken by the city council, which I think are steps in the right direction. For example, I think they're talking about locating mental health professionals at every precinct, which I think is, if it lowers the burden on the cops, then I'm in favor of it. Because right now the cops are spending all their time just repeating the cycle of bringing people in and letting them go and bringing them in and letting them go. So I think the idea that we get the mental health professionals focused on the people who need mental health is the right end game. but you can't jeopardize the impression of public safety. Now, again, if you have a 14-year-old kid, if you have little kids that are their eyes open and they're watching what's going on, if you're, let's say you're a little older person and you're not so physically, capable, there are situations in New York where people just don't walk on the street anymore because they're afraid of somebody with, a mental health issue or criminal acting out against them. So I think this is one where Adams is right. We have to be a little more aggressive than we've been.
Yeah, and like, just so when I listen to Jumaane Williams there, I don't totally disagree with him. Like I'm not saying like he's 100% right. There should be better services down the road after someone is removed from New York City streets. But his sole focus and his sole problem is with the NYPD actually bringing these people to receive medical care. He's misrepresenting it as they're being arrested. And even Don Lemon corrects them. He's like, hold on, we're not arresting these people.
I want to get a video. That was Don Lemon saying something sensible.
Yeah. I mean, he had to correct really Jumaane Williams.
That was a rare one.
Yeah. And he was like, wait a minute, we're not arresting these people. I mean, now under Eric Adams, unfortunately, they are arresting homeless in the subways without providing or offering services. And nearly all of those arrests are being declined prosecution because they shouldn't be arrested in the first place. So but this was 2 years ago prior to Eric Adams doing that. So he's not 100% wrong, but there's just a constant blame on the NYPD for all the ills of society. And he's attempting to remove the NYPD's ability to provide public safety to the people in New York City. So he said it right there. People don't want to see homelessness. People don't want to see the drug addicted and the mentally ill. People don't want to have to interact with them down in the subways on New York City streets. So let's stop the NYPD from being able to do that. It makes absolutely no sense because there's no long-term care. That's not the fault of the NYPD that there's no long-term care. That's the fault of people like himself and other elected officials not coming up with a clear plan. So I appreciate you.
So that's, I think you said it the right thing there, which is, Mayor Adams, unfortunately, has got himself, he got off to not only a bad start, he got off to a very long bad start. He was tripping over his own shoelaces for so long that now we're playing catch up on a situation where we should never be playing catch up. There should have been some type of response on homelessness and mental health 24 months ago, 36 months ago. But because Adams is busy scrambling for his political life, and because Jumaane Williams is scrambling for his political life, you don't have, people doing their jobs. I don't think it'd be that hard to get together with the leadership of the city and say, what's our plan with mental health? What's our plan with taking homeless people who are causing a perceived threat to local residents? What do we do with this? Now, here's where it gets worse. So now you got this guy, Zoran Mondami, running for mayor in a Democratic primary with the socialists turn out in a Democratic primary. So I want you guys to turn out for me in the Democratic primary. Mondami's proposal is to put homeless people into the abandoned, kiosks in the subway station. So, those little places where you used to get your shoes shined or they're selling newspapers. So he's like, well, we have all these room there. And so now you're like, let's turn the subway system into a homeless shelter. So how are the kids going to go to school? How are the nice people, who don't have cars, the people earning, $70,000, $80,000, they have to take the subway. How are they going to feel when they're walking by and then you have there's another person running for well, this is even better. There's another candidate for public advocate named Jennifer Rajkumar. She's an assemblywoman from Queens. She's a civil rights attorney. Now,
the lady in red.
Whatever else you think about New York, the last thing we need is another civil rights attorney in the city. But her proposal is that she's going to use the office of the public advocate to sue New York City, so that the homeless people can be given apartments. And you're like, the whole thing is wrong. You have to go back to let's go back to the Constitution, go back to the Statue of Liberty, go back to the city charter, go back to like what our mission statement as a city is not to take care of everyone. That's not in the city charter. What's in the city charter are an outline of basic municipal services that we're supposed to be providing, and we should be providing them with excellence. We should really up our game. But there's nothing in the Constitution, there's nothing in the city charter that says we're here to take care of everybody. That's the central problem. The central problem is that our society has descended into this culture of complaint where everybody expects the city to take care of them. Now, here's where it really gets to be a problem. We spend $35,000 a year to educate a kid. Now you're educating them for 12 years. You're spending $400,000 to educate a kid. But if that kid learns that they're supposed to be taken care of by New York City for the rest of their lives, well, you're going to spend, you're just spending money forever on this person. So what I'm proposing instead is we have to change the culture with especially the young people so that they understand we're here to create a framework where they can grow if they want to grow. There's equal opportunities. We have a subway that's the most equal opportunity system in the world. So in London, it costs $12 to go, in from far away, and in New York it just costs $5. It's equal everywhere. So what I'm proposing is something called fast start accounts. So a fast start account is like an IRA, but for 15-year-olds. So what I'm saying is from 15 to 25, all the taxes that you paid in New York City and New York State, you get those back on your 26th birthday. And you can get them back for three things. You can get them back to get a college degree paid off from a city or state college. You can get them to buy a property in New York State or New York City, or you can get them to go get retrained. We need to, the purpose of this is to get, if we can get 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds with the objective of getting to their 26th birthday with a good understanding of what it's like to be in the workforce, to be standalone, to have good job references, to have a subway card. And then they say, well, you know what? By my 26th birthday, maybe I'll have $30,000 that I get back from the city or the state. You've created a different mentality in the city than the current mentality, which is I'm going to get to 26 years old. The city's going to take care of me if I fail. Well, that's exactly what's wrong with the mentality of New York City.
No, I think that's a great idea. I love it. I mean, I think that's one of the most coherent ideas I've heard from anybody in New York City for a while.
There's two more parts to it. So the second part is, if you're a parent, you get a rebate on your kids' taxes. So you get 10% back from the city and the state for what your kids pay on taxes. So let's say your kid's paying $20,000 of taxes. They're a good earner. You get some of that back. You know why? Because you were the person who grew that taxpayer. You were the person at the kitchen table making sure the kid did their homework. They went to McDonald's. They turned up on time. They got a good reference. And then the other thing is, if you pay your taxes for 6 years in a row, the 7th year you're going to pay at half price. Because what we're missing is this: we have to focus on income as the measure. Income is the thing. You got to have people with the mentality, which is, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to earn income, and the city is going to recognize that achievement over the course of my life. And instead, what we have is a culture of complaint. And so we need to crack that culture. That's what this election is about. And it's more important than for New York, because the same is true in Chicago, the same is true in Oregon, the same is true in San Francisco, and the same is true in the big cities. So while the Democrats are complaining about Trump, their cities are badly run and they don't have good policies. So what I'm saying to the socialists is like, look, guys, let's stop asking for 30 or 40 things. Let's focus on what we're doing. Let's create some changes. For example, these fast start accounts or whatever, where you could take that nationally. You could say, look at what we did in New York. We came up with some new ideas. and instead, get away from this culture where there's unlimited money. I can complain all I want, and if, the city will take care of me.
I think the problem is, again, I'm going to go back to, these aren't people who have proven themselves to be competent over time, and I think that's the main problem, is the people that are getting elected in New York City do not have actual great work or life experiences. They're going into New York City and they're not really honing in on issues. They're just doing things, right? We're going to house the homeless. I've said it on here before. My cousin's mentally ill, homeless on New York City streets. He has a lot of money. He doesn't need a place to live. He doesn't need any. He's not in his right mind state, so it bleeds him out onto the street, and he doesn't know where he is. His problem is not money. He gets monthly money coming in. He doesn't need the city to fund it. Yet the idea is, we'll just give him a free house. Give him a free house. He's not going to stay in it. He's like, so like, and that's what, no one hones in on the issue. So last thing on Jumaane Williams, I know we beat him up a little bit in here.
Right.
But just to back up on my point is that, like, you have a guy who's dictating policy and legislation and dictating how you should live your life in New York City, but yet he loses his investment home after he racks up $1 million in mortgage debt. And it just shows, like, to me, it's like someone sitting there with a dirty room with food in it and rats and roaches on it, telling me to clean my room, which is immaculate. And this guy's telling me, make sure you clean your room. And I think this is the problem that it stems over. It's not just the public advocate office. It's the entire political landscape in New York City and New York State. I mean, this is a problem. Like, what do you say about personal responsibility and running for office?
I think there's two sides of the problem. One is the candidates and the other one is the voters, which is, let's take AOC, for example. She was a bartender. I've had good relationships with a few bartenders in my life on a Friday night, but why would a bartender with really no life experiences, except, a government job, be considered a credible candidate to be president of the United States? It's baffling to me. And the reason is, I think that the voters in the primary. So what happens is that in the primaries, the voters just don't turn out, except for the socialists. So the progressives are very well organized. I'll give you an example. I must have been to 30 meetings this winter. You go to these meetings on a Tuesday night, or Wednesday night, or Thursday night. They're very well attended by progressives. Okay, they're the ones who come out and vote in the primaries. So that's why you see former Governor Cuomo. He's going to form his own party and run in November. You see Speaker Adams is going to do Adrian Adams is going to do the same thing. So if you think about the electorate in New York, as there's four different parts to it. There's the Republicans, there's the independents, there's what I would call the regular way Democrats like me, and then there's the socialist Democrats. So that's the four different groups. The problem is that in the primary, only the socialist Democrats really come out to vote. So what I'm seeing now is that other candidates are kind of onto this, and they're trying to sort of skip over the primary and get to the November election, because I don't think that it's the will of the people, of the Republicans, the independents, the regular way Democrats, and the socialists. I don't think it's the will of the people that Jumaane Williams should be public advocate. I think what's happened is that the socialists, going back to Bill de Blasio, have just worked out their way through the primary and the political system. I think it's a great idea. Like, if you think about New York, and it's true across the country, but New York's got, we have leaders in banking, we have leaders in entertainment, we have leaders in finance. There's unbelievable human capital. I don't think of myself as being that. I mean, I'm one of, there's 10,000 Marty Dolans out there, but we got to get them into politics. We got to get, the people in the mainstream of society more comfortable to get in. And I hope, I hope my campaign is going to prove some inspiration to other people, because I think the people that end up in politics, they come to their election district leaders, then they're in the community board, and then they're, this, and then they're that. And, I get criticized because I lived in London. I've lived in some other cities around the world. And I'm like, that's a good thing, because I've seen how things work in other cities. And most of the people in the city council have hardly left their neighborhoods their whole lives.
Yeah, I mean, we had Zohran on here a few weeks ago, and the political landscape in New York City is shot. So it's one, you got ranked choice voting, which is going to throw a real wrench in the mayoral race, especially in the Democratic primary. And I see fear from Eric Adams. Eric Adams was planning on running as an independent the entire time. He used that case to run as an independent because he knew he had no shot at winning that Democratic primary. Now you see Cuomo, fear. He's now running as an independent. No, he doesn't want that independent line. He thinks that Zohran Mamdani might beat him in the Democratic primary because of ranked choice voting and because of low voter turnout and low voter information in New York City. And honestly, I'll say it again. Zohran Mamdani, he's ran the best campaign out of everybody out there for New York City mayor. He's got boots on the ground. He's taking the most low voting. Whether I don't like his policies, but who's to blame for that? I blame the Democratic Party and I blame the Republican Party. Right? You have made someone with outlandish ideas the most attractive candidate in the New York City mayoral race because you double down on running the two same failures. Your two top names have proven themselves to be corrupt, incompetent, and inept. And now I think more than likely Zohran Mamdani wins the Democratic primary. What are your thoughts on the mayor race? Like, what are you thinking about it?
Well, I'm glad I'm not in it. So when I was considering what to do, I thought about running for mayor, and I thought, no, I'm not really ready for that. I think the public advocate is a good role for me. The mayor's running a $120 billion city. Public advocate's running, a team of about 25 people, and they're able to do what we talked about. I think where you've hit the nail on the head is that it isn't that the primary is rigged. It's that we just don't get the turnout in the primary. It is not. I'll give an example. In my race against AOC, the AOC got 20,000 votes in my primary. That's all that's keeping her in Congress is somebody's got to come along and get 20,000 votes. And that is in a district of 775,000 people. So the thing is that if Mamdani wins the primary, which I don't think is likely, I will dispute you on that. I think that he may run very well, but he is. I don't think it's likely he will win. I think it's more likely that Cuomo will be the winner. But Cuomo could lose. I'm not saying it's a shoo-in.
Why'd he open that? Why'd he open that independent line if it was a shoo-in? Why do you go with three or four policemen for a situation that one can handle? You gotta have your backup. You gotta be ready. And I said it is possible. So I agree with you that Mamdani, he's very energetic. He's obviously very bright. I think some of his policies are interesting. Some of them are wrong-headed. The idea of putting the homeless in the subway is not a good idea. But the polls are still showing Cuomo having a lead, but we don't know. I think the socialists are continuing to make the same mistake that they have made for years, which is they should really coalesce around one candidate. Because you got Brad Lander in there and you got some other people in there. And if the socialists got their act together, they might have a better chance. And that's been one of my primary complaints when I've talked to the teams, the people representing the socialists. I'm like, you have phenomenal political capital. Like, let's give AOC some credit. Just phenomenal political capital. And it's just been wasted on
on Hamas. It's been wasted on illegal immigration. It's been wasted on, criminal reform. And you're like, if any of that was put towards our education system, if any of that was put towards things that, that were important to our citizens, they'd have a much better case. But unfortunately, they've completely dissipated over 5 or 6 years a phenomenal amount of political capital. And it's been such a complete waste of a half of an era for New York City. And my concern is the following, which is, I'll just tell a little story. When I was a kid, I had a chance to interview the first secretary for the EPA, the Environmental Protection Administration. And I said, how long is it going to take to clean up the environment? And he looked at me and he said, well, it normally takes as long to fix a problem as it did to create it. So I said, you're saying it's going to take 75 to 100 years to clean up the environment? And he said, that's about right. And that's the problem with this mess in New York, which is there's just too much momentum right now behind what I would call this Democrat socialist idea, which is, let's call it, it's been going strong for 6 to 8 years. And I just really worry that it might take 6 to 8 years of, getting things turned around. And so the pitch I'm going to give is, let's get out and vote in the primary. If you want to change, get registered if you're not registered. And if you're registered, get out to vote on June 24th, because it's a suit. That's how you end up changing the city. Otherwise, we'll have another 4 years of the same nonsense.
Marty, retired chief, NYPD chief Rob Lukash asked, after public advocate, what are your political aspirations, if any?
I think a lot about policy, and I think a lot about the way that you can impact a society. If you go back to Lincoln, if you go back to Roosevelt, Roosevelt really wrote the playbook for the Democrats that, Lyndon Johnson followed it, and Bill Clinton followed it, and we're kind of at the end of that trail, and Trump has basically followed the trail blazed by Milton Friedman, great economist, and then Reagan, and then Bush. So I'm focused on policy. I'm focused on what are the things that you can do to affect the society. And, in the tax system, in the leadership, and I'm going to see where that takes me. I think the public advocate role is a great place for me to get started, because it's a leadership role, but it's also a public education role. And then, we'll see what happens from there. I have to win first. I have to win something.
So Marty, why should people vote for you over Jumaane Williams or Jennifer Rajkumar? Why should we vote for Marty Dolan?
Well, I think you have to have fresh perspectives in New York. I think, I'm a big sports fan. So
are you a Knicks fan?
I am a Knicks fan.
You're lucky.
Fan. I'm also a Giants fan, a Jets fan, and I follow all the sports. But this team has been terrible. They Adams, Williams, Lander, the city council collectively, it's been a terrible team. You have to vote them out. You need fresh perspectives. You can't expect to get this different results with the same team. If you have Daniel Jones at quarterback at the Giants, okay, he knows the system, but then you're still with Daniel Jones. So I think it's time to find some fresh perspectives. I think that's what this election is about for me. I think I definitely offer fresh perspectives. You've heard of some of them. And I think you really want to send a signal that things are changing in New York to the people. I think another 4 years of this is not going to work.
I totally agree with you. So anything we missed here? Anything that you wanted to lay out in your campaign? Anything you wanted to speak about?
At the core of it, when I say fresh perspectives, I really mean we need to get the key thing is to call it what it is, which is we have a political culture of complaint and opportunism, and we need to change that into where the political leaders are coming up with new policies that help 90% of the people. And that's really what I'm focused on. And if anybody wants to visit my website, it's very simple. It's martydolan.org. You can send me a message. We are not taking money from PACs. We are raising a little bit of money here and there. The great example is we collected 15,000 signatures from, a budget of $25,000 or $30,000. Jennifer Rajkumar's got $1 million, and she collected fewer signatures than we did. So I'm working with a coalition of Latino city council candidates up in the Bronx. We've got Joel Rivera. We've got Federico Colon. We have Alexander Caruso in Queens. We have Francesca Castellanos in northern Manhattan. And so we're trying to do this from a grassroots perspective. So I'm very optimistic about our chances. And John, thank you for the opportunity to talk to your audience today. And I'm really looking forward to changing New York City for the better.
No, we appreciate you coming on. And for those of you guys, wherever you're watching or listening, if you go in the links to Marty's website, his social media handles, so give him a check out, read up on him. We appreciate you having you on today. And I totally agree with you. New York City needs some fresh perspective. So guys, check out Marty Dolan. Marty, anything before we get out of here? Any last words?
Happy Mother's Day, and soon it'll be Happy Father's Day, and let's go Knicks.
Let's go Knicks, people. That's it. Find us Unfiltered. Executive Perspective will be on tonight, 17:05 or 5:05 p.m. Eastern time. They're going to be talking about the difference between NYPD trainings of Operation Impact versus the field training unit. Check them out, 5:05 p.m. today. Take care. Find us Unfiltered. We'll be back at you.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community, but who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.